Couple of quick housekeeping things before we begin our last presentation today. We're recording the session. The chat is also being recorded, so including any private discussions. So please keep that in mind when you're chatting. We're going to monitor the chat during the presentation, and Stefan will also answer any questions at the end of his presentation. Just a reminder, please, everybody, shut your cameras off as we begin, and also we're going to mute everybody so we don't hear anybody's dog barking or kids in the background, etc. So our last session this afternoon is on carrier innovation, presented by Stefan Holzberger. Stefan is the Chief Rating Officer of AM Best. He's currently responsible for the agency's global rating coverage. Previous roles include both in the US and overseas. Most recently as Managing Director Analytics, where he managed a London-based team covering the European, Middle Eastern, and African insurance markets. Prior to joining AM Best, Stefan was Audit Manager at Jefferson Insurance Group, which is a subsidiary of Allianz. He is a certified public accountant and also holds the Chartered Financial Consultant designation, and we're glad he would be part of our afternoon today at iDay. So without any further ado, please enjoy the session. Stefan, it's all yours.
Super. Thanks very much, Rick. I appreciate it. And thanks to the New Jersey chapter of the CPCU Society for giving me an opportunity to come and present to you today. So as Rick mentioned, our topic for this session is AM Best's innovation criteria and implementation insights. And I can tell you, I, for one, am happy to take a break from talking about COVID-19 and talk about another subject that's near and dear to our hearts at AM Best, and that is innovation. I know I'm the last session standing between you and the virtual happy hour. I can tell you that the organizers have asked me to let you know if you'd like to crack one open right now, ahead of that happy hour, you're more than welcome to.
Done.
So, excellent. So with that, let me go over the agenda of topics I'd like to cover in this session. I'll spend a very brief amount of time telling you about AM Best in case anybody here is not familiar with our organization. We'll jump right into innovation, kind of why now, talk about our rating criteria, how we define, score, and assess innovation. Talk about the drivers of innovation at organizations and how that is becoming more and more important based on the changes taking place in society. I'll talk about the benchmarking results. So our innovation criteria has been live and part of our rating analysis since March of this year. And so we have some data for the industry in terms of how we go about scoring and assessing an insurance company's level of innovation. And I'll share some of those results to you and then talk about what we think innovation will mean within the insurance market going forward. So briefly, in case you're not familiar with AM Best, we've been around for a really long time, and we are, you could say, uniquely focused on the insurance industry, right? So what differentiates us from the other global credit rating agencies is that we're the only one that spends all of our time focused on insurance and risk transfer. Our bread and butter products involve assessing an insurer's financial strength, creditworthiness, and ability to honor obligations to policyholders. We also, in addition to our financial strength ratings, we do issue ratings on debt issued by insurance companies, as well as insurance-linked securities in the property and casualty market, as well as the life and health. We also do a lot of expertise. So beyond the credit ratings and the reports that we write about the creditworthiness of insurance companies, we do a whole bunch of research that's generally free and available on our website. And we're a global organization, right? We've got over 3,400 ratings in some 90 countries. Many of you are familiar with our rating scale. It's listed on the right-hand side. The financial strength rating starts at A++ at the highest, moving down to A+, A-. But I like to remind folks that we also issue ratings using the Issuer Credit Rating Scale, the ICR scale, which, for example, our debt ratings would follow the ICR scale. It's a scale that's more well known to investors in the capital markets. So there's a mapping process. It's not really two different ratings. It's just the same rating using a different nomenclature. So hopefully that makes sense. You find that can be sometimes a source of confusion. But if we move over into our credit rating methodology, right? So as a global credit rating agency, it's important to us that we achieve global consistency with regard to our ratings. So an A- issued on an insurance company in New Jersey has the same credit fundamentals as an A- rated company in the UK or Nigeria or Poland or wherever that happens to be. So we go about assessing insurance companies using these four main pillars: balance sheet strength. And by balance sheet strength, we're talking about risk-adjusted capital, liquidity, financial leverage and coverage. We may be talking about the quality of the reinsurers the insurance company does business with, the quality of reserves and the development on those reserves, and many other factors come into balance sheet strength. Operating performance is fairly self-explanatory. And then comes business profile. Business profile is one of the more qualitative components of our assessment, and that's where innovation resides. So by business profile, we're really talking about the environment, the market where the company is operating in terms of the lines of business that it underwrites, as well as maybe the regulatory or legal environment where that company is. Innovation, I'll go into it a little bit more, is one of those components of business profile. And then finally, enterprise risk management. You know, it's kind of remarkable to think that, 15 plus years ago, enterprise risk management was something in the US particularly that was really just kind of being talked about. It wasn't really all that much embedded within an insurance organization's DNA. But, fast forward to today, enterprise risk managements are hugely important as insurance companies assess their risk, identify their risk tolerance, model and manage the risks across the organization. So kind of focusing now specifically on innovation. There's a lot of drivers that are prompting insurance organizations to become more and more mindful of innovation. Here are some of the external factors, right? You have demographic shifts, for example, a migration towards megacities where the jobs typically are. Not sure whether that will change as a result of COVID-19, but today we see the cities in the US and in other countries getting larger and larger, which brings risk concentration. You've got the gig economy picking up steam, where more and more workers are working on a contracted basis and not so much a permanent employee. And then collaborative consumption trends. Perhaps more and more so taking place as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown. We're all well versed in the P&C market on the climate-related trends, the severity of natural catastrophes growing substantially in this environment, and then finally technology. Right, you've got cloud computing, the Internet of Things, AI, blockchain, all kinds of technologies that are rapidly gaining acceptance in the market today. And then in addition to those external factors that make innovation important, there are internal factors. The insurance market is highly competitive, so there's always pressure on profitability. The demands from the consumer and the customer for the way they interact with their insurance company, their insurance providers, their demands are increasing. They want to see a digital platform. They don't want to necessarily call their agent. They'd like to find what they need online, things like that. And then just the general need to improve operating efficiency, right? The cost margin and the cost structure of most insurance companies and most lines of business is very high. 30 or 40 cents on the dollar going to the expense ratio is probably too high to sustain over a long period of time. So let's kind of go into a definition of innovation, right? There are a lot of definitions out there, and I'd like to share with you ours so you can understand what innovation means to AM Best, specifically with regard to our rating criteria. So we define innovation as a multi-stage process that transforms ideas into new or significantly improved products, processes, services, or business models that have measurable positive impact over time and enable an organization to stay relevant and successful. These capabilities can be grown organically, or they can be derived from external sources, right? So a couple of main takeaways with regard to our definition: we're not just talking about technology or insurtech. Really an innovative organization, it's not just all about signing on and buying into the technologies that are out there. Although, of course, many technologies can be meaningful and improve an organization's operations and competitive profile. The other main takeaway in terms of innovation is we really want to focus on the return on the investment, right? It's one thing to put a lot of resources, spend a lot of money, and put a lot of effort towards innovation. But if the results are not there, it's really a wasted effort. So when we talk to our clients, it's really all about what are the measurable, quantifiable results from that investment. So our innovation initiative specifically has two prongs, right? So one, and the starting point, is that all rated companies are scored and then given an innovation ability assessment. And I'll kind of get into that scoring formula in a moment. But I should mention that this score is really an absolute measure of the company's level of innovation. We're not scoring them relative to their peers. We're not scoring them relative to the innovation in the local markets where they compete. It's one scoring formula that all companies are subject to across the board. And then you can see here that the second prong is really where that innovation score and innovation assessments hits the rating analysis, right? So we say, as part of our building block approach, we're considering whether that company's innovation efforts is going to have a demonstrable impact on its financial strength, right? So this is now getting into that relative measure, and our credit ratings, essentially all credit ratings are a relative measure, right, of credit worthiness. So for the purpose of the rating, we want to know whether that company's innovation capabilities has the potential to give it a particular competitive advantage in the markets where it operates and in relation to the companies that it competes against, right? So those are kind of the two prongs. You start with the absolute score, but then you kind of take that score and that assessment and you look at what that means for the insurance company. So, for example, you could have an insurance company that has a relatively modest level of innovation, right? It's scoring kind of in that mid-range from an innovation standpoint, but it could be competing in a market where its peer companies have really no innovation. Their products, their operations, their customer interaction, not at all innovative, actually quite antiquated. So you have a situation where that company doesn't score extremely high from an innovation capability standpoint, but actually it could be credit positive based on the market that it competes in. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. This is getting back to our global methodology for rating insurance companies. I talked about the 4 pillars of our approach. You can see some of these grayed out boxes kind of starting on the left where we have balance sheet strength. That creates our baseline credit assessment. And then the next 3 pillars, operating performance, business profile, and enterprise risk management, they have the ability to take that baseline assessment, move it up, move it down, or keep it right where it is, heading towards the ultimate rating assignment. And you can see here for this slide where we show specifically business profile, we've added innovation as the 9th component to our business profile assessment. It's one of our more qualitative aspects of the rating analysis. You can see we're talking about the market position. Is the company a leader or a follower in terms of the way it sets rates, pricing, terms, and conditions? How much product risk is there in the businesses that the company underwrites? How competitive is that market? We also look at the management quality of the companies that we follow. And that's a difficult one, really. We're talking about how does the company, what's the track record for management to meet its plan, right? And that can lead to some difficult conversations. But I've included this slide so you can see how the innovation assessment becomes a part of our assessment of business profile. So moving into the scoring for innovation itself, right? At AM Best, we really like highly complicated formulas that really take a long time to digest. I'm happy to tell you on a Friday afternoon, this is not one of them. It's actually quite the opposite. It's a very simple score. We're taking the innovation input score, we're adding to that the innovation output score, and that gives us our overall innovation score. So I'll give you a view on the components, those two main components of the scoring. Right, so here you have the 4 subcomponents for innovation input, right? Each of these 4 subcomponents is scored 1 to 4. So the maximum score for this part of the formula is 16, right? And what are we talking about with leadership? I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We're talking about the tone from the top. This is probably the most critical subcomponent where, is the leadership empowering employees to be change agents within the organization? From there, we talk about the culture of the organization. How well defined is risk throughout the organization? And, clearly innovation is going to thrive in a diverse environment. Process and structure is about avoiding silos and then making sure that the strategies for innovation are aligned with the corporate mission and the corporate strategies overall. And then finally, resources, right? What kind of resources are being devoted to making the company more innovative? You've got technical resources such as systems and data that's available. You've got creative resources in terms of employees being encouraged to find ways to do their job function better, lower the expense ratio, improve efficiency, launch new products, improve the customer experience, etc. And then finally, of course, you have the financial resources. How much is the organization willing and able to invest in innovation? And then the second part of the formula is the innovation output score, also scored 1 to 4 for each of the 2 components, results and level of transformation, right? So this is kind of the return on that investment. What kind of results has the organization achieved as a result of its innovation activities? Tangible, quantifiable results. What can the organization point to that it's now in a better position as a result of those efforts? And then level of transformation is really talking about how material are those results? Are they transformational, or are they kind of incremental improvements in the expense ratio, but not really kind of changing the dynamic or the trajectory of the organization overall? In order to give this part of the formula the same weight as the input score, we multiply this by 2. So here again, you have an opportunity for 16 points. So the total kind of perfect score for innovation per our criteria is a score of 32. So how do we look at the results? Well, we look at the output over a 5-year period, which is kind of in line with how we look at other aspects of our credit analysis. Performance, for example, we generally don't assess operating performance looking at just 1 year. We look at the trends and we look at the averages over a period of time. I mentioned how important it is for the results to be tangible. It's nice to be able to say the organization put all this, time, energy, and resources towards its innovation platform and strategy, but if they can't point to anything that's really benefited the organization as a result, they're not going to score highly in the output assessment. It's not a once and done. There should be a framework that's replicable, right? It's nice to have a win. It's nice to bring in a new technology or a new system or launch a new product and have it be successful, but those truly innovative organizations have, always ideas and opportunities that are coming through the pipeline. You can see a mix between operational and growth, ideally, right? So you have some operational back office benefits where you're maybe saving in some cost, but you've also embraced innovation to grow the business, launch new products, enter new markets, find a new customer base, right? And then, as I mentioned, in that kind of level of transformation, nothing wrong with incremental results, nothing wrong with achieving some level of disruption in the market by launching a new product or approaching a risk in a different way than maybe has been done traditionally. A lot of good examples in the reinsurance market on that front. And then you see here our categorization, you could say, in terms of those scores, right? So we have 5 categories, and based on the scoring, it goes from minimal, moderate, significant, prominent to a leader in terms of innovation. And again, that scoring and that assessment would feed into our view of the business profile of the organization. Most organizations, most insurance organizations today fall into the moderate category with a score between 12 and 17. And I think it's in line with where the industry sees itself. As we were developing this criteria, we surveyed the industry, and the results of that, over 80% of respondents indicated that they felt that the industry was a bit behind the curve when it comes to innovation. So the industry itself recognizes that there's work to be done on this front. All right, so let's jump into the drivers and importance of innovation, right? So why are we talking about it now? I think it's important to appreciate that we feel that we've encompassed innovation in our credit analysis all along, but now this year we're making it more of an explicit standalone part of our analysis, you could say, by the scoring and bringing attention to innovation specifically in our reporting on the credit quality of insurance companies. And so why are we doing that? Well, the pace and the magnitude of technological and societal change, some of the things that I was talking about at the outset of the presentation, is making innovation more and more critical for the insurance industry. And you can see this pie chart here. Again, when we surveyed the industry, they agreed. The vast majority felt that innovation was critical to their future success. And you can see here the 1% that didn't find innovation critical. Those companies went to rating committee and were downgraded. I'm just joking, by the way, we didn't do that. A little humor, sorry. Okay, so let's move on. And I don't know if there are any specific questions. I don't know exactly. I'm not all that well versed with the, oops, let me go back, with the chat function here, but hopefully you don't mind. I'm happy to take as many questions as time allows at the end, but I'll kind of get to the conclusion of my prepared comments, and then certainly happy to try to address as many questions as I can. But kind of sticking on the theme of why innovation is so important, take a look at what they call big data, right? All of the data that's available, it's just grown exponentially, right? In terms of what's publicly available, what's out there to benefit underwriting, claims handling. But of course, the main takeaway is it's important or critical even that the insurance organizations have the systems and the capabilities to mine that data and make use of it, right? So for insurance companies running on legacy systems that aren't dynamic, aren't able to really kind of get into the data and see the trends and utilize that data for underwriting purposes, for example, it's really of no use to them. So there's a strong incentive to make system and database improvements to make use of this data. Similarly, look at the growth of the Internet of Things. All these connected devices, all of the sensor technology that uses AI to feed back information as necessary. So you've got a huge increase in IoT connected devices, and even what they call the non-IoT, so the smart devices that are, maybe not kind of sensor driven or utilizing AI. They might actually be a platform where you get that information that was the result of Internet of Things devices, but both growing exponentially and predicted to continue to do so, of course. So where are the opportunities? I think I've mentioned some of them. Certainly improving the customer experience, enhancing customer service is going to be more and more important in the competitive landscape, right? The customer expectations are such that they want to have different options in terms of how they communicate with their insurer. And it's critically important, never more so under COVID-19, to be able to support that. Technology, a marginal improvement in underwriting through technological advances. Every point on the loss ratio that comes down travels right to the bottom line, hugely valuable in a competitive market. And then kind of the digital ecosystems, right? Beyond the traditional insurance policy, these new products, digitalization, et cetera, it's creating an opportunity for new product development, new sources of revenue that are probably not as competitive as the traditional products, cyber being one example of that. So you've got the impact of COVID on innovation, right? I mean, InsurTech was and continues to be, hugely popular in the industry. Some projects have taken a step back as organizations focused on being able to continue to operate, support core functions in a remote work environment. But other areas of innovation around digitalization, whether it's distribution, claims handling, customer experience, underwriting, et cetera, never more important than it is today in this remote environment. And then product innovation. We talk here about usage-based insurance, the whole concept of the pricing for personal auto, right? I've been working remotely mostly for 6 or 7 months. Should I still be paying, ultimately the same premium for my personal auto policy? I'd like to think not. We'll see how that develops and which innovative companies, how they handle that going forward into 2021. All right, kind of getting towards the home stretch here. I mentioned I would share some benchmarking results of our innovation assessments. And you can see here that 50% of our rated population scores in the moderate category, right? And very few currently are at the leader. Remember, we're looking not just within the insurance industry, we're looking on an absolute basis across all industries, really what capabilities are out there and where does this insurance company or that insurance company stack up. So currently very few companies achieving the prominent or leader category, but we do expect that to change over time. And where do we see the leaders in terms of examples within the insurance industry of some really impressive, innovative capabilities? Reinsurance is a great example. You've got insurance-linked securities that transfer risk to the capital markets, whether it's cat bonds, ILWs, life settlement securitizations, mortality securitizations on the health side. Very innovative risk transfer solutions coming through on the reinsurance segment. On the health side, you have telemedicine, you've got wearables. These are things that not that long ago were just talked about as something that we might see in the future, but they're really here today. Under COVID-19, telemedicine is really propelling itself, and wearables are becoming more and more relevant, more and more in use. And then personal auto is probably the poster child for successful innovation, right? Where you have companies like Geico, Progressive, and many others who have harnessed predictive analytics, sophisticated risk segmentation, and it's really shown in the underwriting results over a number of years. And really, in order to compete in personal auto, the organizations really have to have embraced that technology for underwriting purposes and pricing and risk segmentation, et cetera. So talking about the average total innovation score by assessment. And I think that the main reason I'm showing you this slide is you can see for every category of assessment, right now, the input score is greater than the output score. And that really ties into where we see the insurance industry, right? We really see insurers working on their framework, working on their processes, trying to identify the opportunities, ensuring they have the right culture to be innovative, right? So we see much more a focus on the inputs and not so much successes on the outputs yet. And this is another way to think about that. So this is the average input score divided by the average output score, right? So if you were at a score of 1.0, for every dollar, so to speak, you spend on innovation, you get a return that's worth $1 in terms of expense savings, additional revenue, whatever your metric is. And not surprisingly, the higher up the assessment category you go, the closer to that 1-to-1 ratio you have. But if you consider that most insurers are in that moderate category right now, you can see they're putting a lot more emphasis on the input and getting a lesser return for the output, hence the 1.35 kind of ratio between the scoring of the input versus the output. Beyond the results, innovation is not transformative yet. You can see, focusing on that level of transformation, the vast majority of companies score on the lower end of the four possible points, right? So most are scoring 1 or 2 when it comes to the level of transformation. Talked about how innovation has really always been inherent in the credit rating analysis, and you can see the correlation here. The point here is those insurance companies scored superior or excellent, right? A++, A minus. They're the ones that by and large have the highest scores for their current innovation capability, right? And that transitions down to the lower the credit rating, the farther behind you might say they are from an innovation capability standpoint. And then, the results score, kind of coming back to the second half of the formula. What are the results? The highest rated companies, again, they're the ones that are getting the score of 3 or 4 when it comes to results. Very few companies are scoring highly from a level of transformation, like the materiality of those results, but from a pure results standpoint, those highest rated companies can point to tangible, real returns on their innovation investment. And finally, the outlook for innovation is positive. There's so many opportunities to leverage innovation to improve an insurance company's business, whether it's the customer experience, operating efficiencies, underwriting performance, right? Deepening that partnership or the relationship with the insured, really helps that persistence. A loyal customer base is going to be a more profitable customer base. And then finally, this expanding digital ecosystems. The world around us is changing. It means that the insurance products need to change. And so companies that really embrace that and make sure the products are really commensurate with where the demand is for insurance, they're the ones that are going to be most successful. So with that concludes my prepared comments. I think what I'll do now, hopefully I won't mess this up, and I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and hopefully I'll be able to open the chat function. Let's see here, and see if I can get to any questions that have come through. Let's see.
3 in there, Stefan.
Sorry, Rick?
There's only 3 questions in there.
Okay.
Hopefully you can run through them.
Okay, so let me see here. Yep, I see one. Of that 4-point range, +2 to -2, how much can the innovation component affect that number? Okay, yeah, that's a good question, and it goes back to our building block approach for assigning a credit rating, right? So I think what this is referring to is we have the baseline assessment based on balance sheet strength. Let's say that's A minus. Operating performance can move that up or down. For this purpose, for this example, let's say it's neutral, so it doesn't change the rating, it remains A minus. Business profile has the ability to move that rating up 2 notches all the way to down 2 notches, right? So it's quite important to the overall rating assignment. Right now, we've said publicly that we don't see innovation really changing many ratings. And in fact, when we rolled out the methodology earlier this year, we didn't change any ratings as a result of that new component of our analysis. I think the main takeaway is we feel that based on these structural, societal, demographic changes, innovation is going to be more and more important from a credit standpoint over time. So whereas ratings aren't changing today as a result of innovation, companies that don't embrace innovation will ultimately experience a competitive disadvantage. They'll see adverse selection as their competitors around them become more and more innovative. So that's the way we look at that. We want to alert the market that innovation matters, even though today we don't see many ratings change. Another question, let's see here. Why would the number of leaders change over time? Shouldn't they be pushing the envelope by definition? If everyone is above average, the metric is wrong. Okay, so yeah, so that's an important point. So I think I would go back to this notion of when we score companies for their innovation, we're doing that on an absolute basis, right? So we're really not looking at their competitors. We're not looking at the demands of the market for innovation. We're simply providing our insight based on our dialogue with companies and what we see in terms of their capabilities. So, you know, if we were evaluating the tech industry, we might have 90% of our population in the leader or prominent category. But, you know, we know where we are from the insurance company standpoint. In terms of what it means for the rating, though, that really becomes a relative measure. Personal auto, you have to be innovative to compete. And for the most part, most companies in the United States have achieved a pretty good level, right? Maybe they're not all leaders, but they're very strong. It's almost a cost of doing business. But if you go to maybe non-standard auto or something, or, you know, some sort of, or bail bonds or surety, maybe it's not a segment of the market that's demanding so much innovation, right? So that's where that differentiator comes into play. All companies could conceivably be leaders, but it wouldn't necessarily improve their rating, right? Next question, are insurance organizations completing a questionnaire or report, a summary to provide the data for AM Best to prepare their ratings for innovation, right? So what we do is we have, you know, regular interaction with our insurance companies throughout the year. We get quarterly updates, mid-year updates on how they're doing per plan, and have an understanding of how they're progressing through the year from a performance standpoint, any challenges, opportunities, et cetera. Beyond that, we have a very in-depth annual meeting with the senior management of the organizations where we may spend a half day, a full day, sometimes multiple days based on the complexity of the organization. Now, one of the things that we talk about them in that annual meeting is their innovation, right? So that's really our main opportunity to understand where they stand in terms of their innovation efforts and the results from that. Simple question about sharing the presentation. You know, I can tell you, maybe Rick can add to it, but I'm more than happy to share this presentation and make it available to anybody who's interested. And I see Matt has actually responded to that. So I guess that's clear that the session will be available and the presentation will be as well. Okay. Okay, one more question I see has come through. with the BLM movement, do you think that the insurance carriers will strive to improve and focus on the culture component of the innovation score? Okay, BLM movement being Black Lives Matter movement. Will that prompt carriers to strive to improve and focus on the culture component of the innovation score? I mentioned in my commentary a diverse culture. Well, it has benefits really across the board, right? The worst thing for any organization, but perhaps a more conservative organization that tends to be seen in the insurance industry, is this whole group think, right? You really, no organization is going to benefit from that. A diversity in backgrounds on every level is certainly good for new ideas, for pushing the envelope on doing things differently than perhaps the organization has done for 10, 50, 100 years. So, frankly, we put a lot of emphasis on that at AM Best. Financial services is not a particularly diverse industry, and that goes for the insurance industry within financial services. So my view is that it's critical, it's incumbent upon all leadership in insurance organizations to really try to improve that diversity, and everyone stands to benefit, including the innovation efforts. So I think that pretty much concludes the questions. No more commentary from me. Again, I just want to thank the organizers for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon, and cheers to I'm sure a very well-earned virtual happy hour that follows this session. Back to you, Rick.
Thank you, Stefan. Thanks for being part of our day, and thanks for some insight into just seeing a letter next to an insurance carrier, so we know a little bit more about what goes into that, whether it's just on your website or in the back of your magazine. So thanks for the information. Wendy or anybody else that would, if you would like a copy of the PowerPoint, I do have it. I'll be happy to email it to you. As Matt said in the chat, that we're going to post all the sessions today on our YouTube channel. We're going to do some editing and clean them up a little bit, but we will get them up there. How soon do you think that'll be, Matt?
Probably a week to two, depending on, I'm gonna have to watch a good portion of them over again, so it does take a little bit of time, but yeah, it'll probably be a week to 2 weeks.
All right, so again, Stefan, thank you for your time today. And for everybody else, thanks for being part of our iDay. We have one more important thing, and that's cocktail hour in 2 minutes. So I'll let everybody exit here, and there's another link for cocktail hour. So we hope to see everybody there. And if not, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you, the rest of you, very soon, hopefully in person.